Luke 23, verse 13 through 49, let's read together. It says, "And Pilate, when he had called together the chief priests and the rulers and the people, he said to them, Ye have brought this man unto me as one that perverteth the people. And behold, I, having examined him before you, have found no fault in this man, touching those things whereof ye accuse him. No, nor yet Herod, for I sent you to him, and lo, nothing worthy of death is done unto him. I will therefore chastise him and release him. For of necessity he must release one of them at the feast. And they cried out all at once, saying, Away with this man, and release unto us Barabbas, who for a certain sedition made in the city, and for murder was cast into prison. Pilate therefore, willing to release Jesus, spake again to them. But they cried, saying, Crucify him! Crucify him! And he said unto them the third time, Why? What evil hath he done? I have found no cause of death in him. I will therefore chastise him, and let him go. And they were instant with loud voices, requiring that he might be crucified. And the voices of them and of the chief priests prevailed. And Pilate gave sentence that it should be as they required. And he released unto them him that for sedition and murder was cast into prison, whom they had desired, but he delivered Jesus to their will. And as they led him away, they laid upon one Simon of Cyrene, coming out of the country, and on him they laid the cross, that he might bear it. And there followed him a great company of people, and of women, which also bewailed and lamented him. But Jesus, turning unto them, said, Daughters of Jerusalem, weep not for me, but weep for yourselves, and for your children. For behold, the days are coming, in the which they shall say, Blessed are the barren, and the wombs that never bare, and the paps which never gave suck. Then shall they begin to say to the mountains, Fall on us, and to the hills cover us. For if they do these things in a green tree, what shall be done in the dry? And there were also two others, malefactors, led with him to be put to death. And when they were come to the place which is called Calvary, there they crucified him, and the malefactors, one on the right hand and the other on the left. Then said Jesus, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And they parted his raiment, and they cast lots. And the people stood beholding, and the rulers also with them, derided him, saying, He saved others, let him save himself, if he be the Christ, the chosen of God. And the soldiers also mocked him, coming to him and offering him vinegar, and saying, If thou be the King of the Jews, save thyself. And a superscription also was written over him in the letters of Greek and Latin and Hebrew, This is the King of the Jews. And one of the malefactors which were hanged railed on him, saying, If thou be Christ, save thyself and us. But the other answering rebuked him, saying, Dost not thou fear God, seeing thou art in the same condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we receive the due reward of our deeds. But this man hath done nothing amiss. And he said to Jesus, Lord, remember me when thou comest into thy kingdom. And Jesus said unto him, Verily I say unto thee, today shalt thou be with me in paradise. And it was about the 6th hour, and there was a darkness over all the earth until the 9th hour. And the sun was darkened, and the veil of the temple was rent in the midst. And when Jesus had cried with a loud voice, he said, Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. And having said thus, he gave up the ghost. Now when the centurion saw what was done, he glorified God, saying, Certainly this was a righteous man. And all the people that came together to that sight, beholding the things which were done, smote their breasts and returned. And all his acquaintances, and the women that followed him from Galilee, stood afar off, beholding these things. When I started thinking about how Easter was coming up, and I know, like I said, we've been going over the Judges, I started thinking about the cross and the crucifixion. I started thinking about how many different people were there at the crucifixion. How many different personalities, how many different types of people were there, both Jews and Gentiles. So I started to think about it would be neat to do a series on the characters at the crucifixion. The different characters at the crucifixion. And today we're going to look at the crowd at the crucifixion. The crowd at the crucifixion. Who were they? Certain people that were all in there. What was their attitude towards Christ? What happened there? And how we, each and every one of us, can at least identify with one of these types of people that was in the crowd at the crucifixion. So today we're going to look at that. Characters at the crucifixion. We're going to look at the crowd. The first type of people in the crowd I want us to look at and identify with is found in verse 27. And there followed him a great company of people and of women, which also bewailed and lamented him. The first characters I want you to see in the crowd at the crucifixion were the weeping women. The weeping women. They cried, they mourned, they lamented as Christ was led away to be crucified. They were in the crowd as well when Christ was crucified. I want us to look at these women, what type of people they were, and how we should be able to identify with them as Christians. The first thing I want you to notice about the weeping women is found in verse 27 through 31. And there followed him a great company of people and of women, which also bewailed and lamented him. But Jesus, turning unto them, said, Daughters of Jerusalem, weep not for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For behold, the days are coming, in the which they shall say, Blessed are the barren, and the wombs that never bare, and the paps which never gave suck. Then shall they begin to say to the mountains, Fall on us, and unto the hills cover us. For if they do these things in a green tree, what shall be done in the dry? I want us to see this first thing about the weeping women. Characters in the crucifixion. The weeping women are those who can't help but cry. Those who can't help but cry. I hate for myself to be identified as being a woman, but when I think about the cross and what Christ went through for us, I can't help but cry. Think about the pain and anguish that he went through for us, I can't help but cry. When I think about these women, it's so significant as well that it says that they were crying as Jesus was led away to be crucified because they couldn't help but cry. And I started looking and thinking about the reasons why Jesus told them to stop crying. Back in those days, public grief was a thing, and it was also a profession. Lots of people, when somebody would die, they would pay women to come in and to cry for the deceased. It was a thing for lots of widows and women to make money that way. They'd cry at a funeral. But here, Jesus was a criminal. It was illegal for you to show grief for one who has committed a crime. So when they were weeping, they were not paid weepers. They were actually committing a crime when they cried while the Lord Jesus Christ was being driven away to be crucified on the cross. They couldn't help but cry because public grief was forbidden by the Sanhedrin for one who they say had committed a crime. They couldn't help but cry for Jesus because they loved him so much and they knew what he was doing, how he was going to die on the cross. They might not have known for the sins of the world, but they knew he was going to die here. So I want you to think about this. The weeping women, those who can't help but cry. Public grief and crying for criminals was forbidden by the Sanhedrin. I want you to look at this, what Jesus says to them, however, about their weeping. He says, Daughters of Jerusalem, weep not for me, but weep for yourselves, he says, and for your children. He said, weep for yourselves. We too should do the same thing. Don't weep for Christ who's on that cross, but weep for ourselves because we are the ones who put him there. That's what Christ was saying there. Don't cry for me, he said. Cry for yourselves, for your sinful nature, because you are the ones, we are the ones, who are putting him up there on the cross. And he says, cry for your children as well. As he talks on later, he says in verse 31, For if they do these things in the green tree, what shall be done in the dry? He says, weep for yourselves, and he also says, weep for the dry trees. What Jesus was talking about there is Jesus, of course, is life. He's like a green tree full of life. And he says, if God the Father allows this to happen to me, for